This is the Italian Citizenship Podcast, hosted by Marco Permunian and Rafael Di Furia. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Italian Citizenship Podcast, presented by Italiancitizenshipassistance.com. Of course, we are back at it again with Italian attorney Marco Permunian, and I am Rafael Di Furia. And in this episode, we wanted to talk a little bit about living as an Italian citizen in the EU, but some of this information also, for those of you who may not be Italian citizens and may hold the citizenship of another country, some of this information could be relevant to you as well. But Marco, just to get started with the episode, I know one of the things that especially those who are gaining citizenship by descent or gaining recognition through citizenship by descent are very interested in the ability to have the free movement in the European Union. But I think one of the maybe biggest misconceptions about the freedom of movement is not necessarily the freedom to remain in a country. So could you tell us a little bit about just kind of the basic idea of how these work?
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to clarify that because there's a lot of confusion regarding the rights to stay in other European countries if you hold the citizenship of one country of the European Union. But before we talk about that, let me also say that while you can have one or multiple European passports, meaning passports issued by countries that are in the European Union, there is no such thing as a European passport per se. So you can have a passport of Italy, Germany, multiple passports of multiple European countries, but there's not a European passport issued by the European Union. Being a citizen of one or multiple countries that are part of the European Union qualify you as an EU citizen. And that, of course, gives you certain rights. And one of the most important rights is the right to travel freely within the EU, but also to relocate in other European countries. And if you want to relocate to a different European country, meaning different from the country that you are a citizen of, you can do so freely, but up to 3 months, meaning that you can just decide to relocate to a different European country and stay freely without any restrictions or without any conditions that need to be met for up to 3 months. But if you want to stay longer, certain conditions and rules will apply. And that basically means that you can relocate in a different country with the purpose of residing there long term if you can support yourself. So if you have a job, if you are a self-employed person, if you are an employee, as long as you have an income and you can support yourself, you will be allowed to stay in the different European country, different from the country of your origin. Or for instance, if you are a student, different rules apply. But the bottom line is you can't just relocate long term in another European country. There are rules that need to be respected if you want to relocate long term, meaning for more than 3 months in a different European country. But let's take a step back. If you are a citizen of an EU country and you want to relocate to another EU country for more than 3 months, you have an obligation to register as a resident. So you can't just go there and reside there. If your intention is to stay long term, you will need to attend an appointment with the local authorities to register formally your residency. In Italy, for example, if you are coming from a different European country, you will have to go to the Anagrafe office, meaning the Vital Records office at the town hall, and declare that that's your place of residency, and the local municipal police will come to your house and check that you actually reside there, that the house is habitable, and you will also need to present at the time in which you request the registration as a resident proof that you have an income, that you have a job, the requirements that I mentioned before. If all of those conditions are met and the police verification is successful, then you become a legal resident of that town in Italy. And that, of course, gives you more benefits like the right to register with the healthcare system, the right to apply for an Italian ID, and many more. And the situation, of course, is similar in other European countries, meaning that if you want, as an Italian, to relocate to another EU country, you have an obligation to register as a resident from a legal standpoint in that country. Again, only if you want to stay for longer than 3 months. And let's keep in mind that registering as a resident gives you several benefits. For instance, if you want to open a bank account, opening a bank account as a resident may be much more efficient and more cost effective than opening a bank account as a resident. Also, the right to be covered by the other country's healthcare system only starts when you register as a resident in that European country. And also, it may not be possible to purchase a car and register the car and the insurance under your name in the other European country if you have not moved your residency from a legal standpoint. But with all of that being said, regardless of the registration as a resident, which, like I said, requires that you prove that you can support yourself through work activities, you're an employee and whatnot, there will be consequences in certain European countries that can be quite serious in the event that the country finds that you're unable to support yourself, that you don't have a job, and you may face even consequences in terms of being forced to leave that country.
Well, Marco, thank you so much for going into that topic and clarifying a bit about the freedom of movement in Europe. But I'm also wondering if it's maybe worthwhile for us to go into some of the protections that exist for a citizen of an EU country to live in another EU country. For example, Social Security, health, workers' rights, those sorts of things. Could you maybe tell us a little bit more about that?
If you are an EU citizen residing in a different European country, you are treated the same as the locals, so you have the same rights as the citizens of that country in terms of accessing job opportunities and entering into work agreements. And your work contract actually may be one of the documents that are required to register as a resident. And depending on the circumstances, you also may have the same rights of the citizens of that country in terms of Social Security and healthcare. There are also other rights that come with being an EU citizen. For instance, if you're residing in a different country from your country of origin, you can also participate and be elected in the local elections. Furthermore, if you are traveling outside of the EU and you are in a country where your own country doesn't have any embassy or consulate, you have the right to be protected by the consulate or embassy of another EU country. And of course, it's also worthwhile mentioning that while these rights apply to the person itself, there are also rights that apply to the spouse of the European citizen who is residing in another country, meaning that the spouse of an EU citizen residing in a different EU country can also obtain residency in that country based on the fact that his or her spouse is an EU citizen residing there. And this also means that if you are an EU citizen, so say an Italian citizen, and you decide to reside in Spain, you can sponsor your, for instance, American spouse, a non-EU citizen spouse, to come and live with you in that European country. And that process is actually very simple and very quick. So immediately upon relocation, including the scenario in which you relocate with your spouse can obtain a residency permit from that country that allows her or him to legally reside in that country for as long as you legally reside in that country. Of course, the prerequisite for your spouse to be able to establish residency in that country and obtain a residency permit is the fact that you have already legally established residency in that country. So if you're an Italian, in the example that I was given before, and you relocated to Spain with your spouse, upon relocation, you must register with the local authorities to obtain your residency, and only afterwards your spouse can obtain residency herself or himself. So it's very important that you register yourself as a resident immediately upon relocation, because your wife or husband will only have a limited amount of time to be able to obtain a residency permit. But like I said, the procedure is very quick and easy, so normally there are no issues whatsoever when it comes to sponsoring non-EU citizens to be able to reside in a European country with their European spouse. The same also applies to EU citizens' parents who have non-EU citizens' children. And of course, the same applies to EU citizens who have children who are minors and who are non-EU citizens. In that scenario, the minor children will be legally allowed to reside with their parent, not only in the country in which the parent has citizenship, but also in a different European country, as long as the European parent is registered in that country as a resident. With all of that being said, being a citizen of the European Union also allows you to receive unemployment in a different country from your country of origin, but there are certain countries that may ask you to leave the country at a certain point if you become too much of a burden for that specific country. And of course, up to this point, we have been talking about individuals who are citizens of a country who move to a different European country. But it's important to remember that after 5 years of residency in the different European country, you acquire the right to reside permanently in that country, and you can request a certificate that basically certifies that you have become a permanent resident of that other European country. And of course, that makes your life easier because your stay is no longer connected to you having a job, you having the means to support yourself. And so you have more freedom to be able to reside in that country. And also, it's important to remember that many European countries allow you to also acquire the citizenship of that country through residency. So after residing in that country for a number of years. For instance, in the case of Italy, you can start petitioning to become an Italian citizen after 4 years of residency in Italy if you are an EU citizen.
Well, Marco, thank you so much for sharing all of this information about living as an Italian citizen or as an EU citizen living in another EU nation that is not their own. Of course, if you are a citizen of an EU nation and living in the country where you hold citizenship, then of course there are not going to be any restrictions in place. But Marco, if somebody's interested in getting Italian citizenship, whether it's through naturalization or through their ancestry or even exploring the possibility of another European citizenship, how can they get in contact with you and your team?
People can contact us through our website, Italiancitizenshipassistance.com.
Absolutely fantastic. And of course, for more information like this, be sure that you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, as well as the audio-only podcast. But of course, if you are subscribed to the YouTube channel, that means you're not only subscribed to the Italian Citizenship Podcast, but also to episodes of Ask the Italian Lawyer and episodes of the Italian Real Estate Podcast, where Marco and I go into some of the realities and practicalities of making Italy your home. And for more about life abroad and living abroad, be sure to check out my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Rafael Di Furia, or you can search YouTube or Google for Not Your Average Globetrotter. Again, though, we have been here with Italian attorney Marco Permunian from Italiancitizenshipassistance.com for another episode of the Italian Citizenship Podcast. I'm Rafael Di Furia. Stay safe and healthy out there, and we will see you all next time. Thank you.
Thank you.